introduction. I'm really excited to deliver this presentation. It's something that is very near and dear to my heart, something that I had been researching and developed quite a few years ago. And as many people who I have worked with using this, this model, this theory, have told me that it's really a powerful way of getting at both leadership development and culture development, utilizing the brand at the core. And that because of that, it really brings together everybody. And that's why I'm very proud of it. So let me just get this first slide going. So what is brand-centered sustainability? It's a mindful approach that connects people to inspired, accountable visions and results in attuned, compassionate leadership and healthy growth. And what I'm really talking about here is when we really infuse the brand essence into all facets of an organization or a person's life. Now, we can utilize this for individuals as well. It was originally developed mostly for organizational consulting and coaching. And what do I mean by the brand essence? Well, the brand essence is also considered the meaning behind an organization, a product, a person. It's more about the details of what that brand is about. If you think about what a brand stands for or what a person stands for, you know, the values that drive its behavior or even its outward appearance. It's also, the brand essence is also what makes a brand different. And when you really think about it, all of this together, that brand essence, this is the glue that binds intentions, aspirations, and behavior. And that's truly important because in a team, a community, or even an organizational setting, it's about an integrated culture built and developed around the brand versus around just one person or just around a dream or a vision. It's something that is built around a deeper reflection of everything that that organization stands for, that team stands for, or that person stands for. So I like to always include quotes from other people so that I'm not the only expert in the room. And brand-centered sustainability is also built from theories of complexity and systems theory and this idea of interdependency. So I love this quote by Edgar Schein. He says, "Not only does culture reside within us as individuals, but it is also the hidden force that drives most of our behavior, both inside and outside organizations. We are members of a country, an occupation, an organization, a community, a family, a social group. Each of these cultures is part of us and impacts us." And when we think about that, we realize we're not in a silo. So whether we are lower management, middle management, upper management, we might even be the executive, we could be running a nonprofit, or we could be looking at starting our own business. We realize that there's all these different versions of culture that start with us and kind of spread outwards, and we affect everyone. So he goes on to say, in every new social situation, whether we are aware of it or not, we function as leaders, and that we are not only reinforce and act as part of the present culture, but often begin to create new cultural elements. This interplay of cultural creation, reenactment, and reinforcement creates an interdependency between culture and leadership. And so when we think about that, no matter where you are in your life right now, personally or professionally, that something that you do, some way you behave is a process of leadership, and that you are creating cultures, possibly bringing in new parts of a culture to create something even more powerful and more lasting. And so when we think of it that way, then we realize that we are making impacts at every measure. So I abbreviate brand-centered sustainability as BCS. So, and I say, why should you care? Well, brand-centered sustainability, and this is also understood as Blue Rio Strategy's version of brand leadership. So when I first began this many years ago, I was working directly with the leaders, and we were talking about more improved, effective, efficient, and also compassionate ways of building leadership development. And it still came back down to the brand. And then we expanded that out to look at how do we create that as something as a sustainable force for culture and organizational success. So brand leadership from Blue Rio Strategies viewpoint is really brand-centered sustainability. And it's an integrated way of operating systems, people, behaviors, even thoughts and actions. You know, there's so much value about it. It breaks down boundaries. It rejuvenates loyalty, creativity. It inspires respectful working conditions. It even takes into consideration the personal brands of the organization's staff, kind of how people have their own purpose and their own mission and vision, and where is that commonality with that and the organizational brand or the product brand. It builds upon relationships, it creates relationships, and it even engages people. And I often refer to it as being about the core promise of an organization and the delivery of that promise. The other thing that I didn't put on this slide that I find very important, and it came to me as I was delivering a class to other coaches, some of them leaders of organizations who have also become coaches, some of them with degrees as high as, you know, PhDs. And one of the things that came up, a student and said it was okay to share this, I won't share her name. She talked about why she liked brand-centered sustainability and why she cares about it. And she said that building a business or a life for sustained success is not often easy. And it's not without challenges and conflict. And she goes on to talk about conflict and building leadership through brand-centered sustainability in a way that's accepting and dealing with conflict head on. Now, she has this brilliant perspective of conflict in that she says she sees it as the foundation of examining perspectives, hidden knowledge, and opportunities for deep growth. And I thought that's exactly what this is about. It's about meeting ourselves, our team, our organization, where we are in life and moving us forward. It's a growth model. And she also said approaching conflict means having empathy for those involved and seeking a higher ground to aspire for these solutions. And so when we use brand-centered sustainability as a form of leadership development, we're also helping leaders approach the challenges in their organization, approach the challenges even with their team, with a sense of purpose and strategy, and yet also with a sense of empathy, so that we're bringing in the human qualities. And so I think that this is something that all of us should care about at some level, because we want success and we want growth, yet we want it to be sustainable, not something that is a quick fix, a quick solution, and a quick means to success. Because very often when we see that, we also see people falling down from that success. So we're looking at ways that are smart, intuitive, and that are not always necessarily easy to implement, but that have ways to implement for lasting success. And so why do we do this? So I always like to include a slide about, when we know that brand-centered sustainability is weak. So if you look at these bullet points, you're looking at things that are somewhat divided in terms of organizational weakness, or team weakness, business weakness, and then something that is personal. So if you look at where it says goals misunderstood and not reached. So this can be both at an individual level, but it can also be at a team level. So it could be that, middle management, upper management, even the C-suite, the executives, have these goals lined out. But maybe the communication hasn't been as cohesive or as concise. And so what ends up being achieved might be seen as a short-term goal success, or it might not be reached at all. So we see this a lot because it's not connected to the brand. And the brand, again, we're going to get into this in a few minutes. The brand, again, the brand essence represents everything that product or that company represents. Another symptom when the brand-centered sustainability is weak is that others don't understand the mission. Now, I hope I don't insult people that work on mission development. I'm one of them. I've been doing work around this for many, many years. And I can even look back on mission statements that I helped develop and see them now and think, okay, well, the intention was really pure and the intention was genuine, but by gosh, that's really hard to understand. You know, a mission and a mission statement is something that should be inspirational, motivational, yet it should also be so easily understood that people can continue to share it. They can replicate the message of it so that people understand easily what the mission is about. So when others don't truly capture that mission, they can't not necessarily regurgitate it word for word, but they can't reframe it in a way that makes sense. Brand-centered sustainability is weak. When we see conflict in the workplace, we often think of it as just on a personal basis, you know, one teammate not working well with the other teammate, or one supervisor doesn't understand, you know, her staff, and there's conflict around a project. And yet, when we're putting brand at the center, we are putting the essence of what a project stands for at the center, right? What a team stands for at the center. And so with doing that, communication usually is far more coherent, and we have less conflict. When teams and departments work at cross purposes. So now, certainly many organizations are developed in silos, and there's a reason for that. Yet when they're working in silos and there isn't at least some type of communication, some type of sharing of information about the brand, they tend to work at cross purposes. I had a client recently that experienced this, where the one IT department was developing a product and expected the marketing department to share a message about that product with the clients that would make sense. The marketing department didn't even see the value in that product and went ahead, created a newsletter that didn't even include the announcement of the product. Yet, from the product development standpoint and from other departments in terms of their goals, financial goals, that product was important. So these teams and departments are literally working against each other without meaning to. And it's because they're not connected by that brand. Now, when we look at, let's say, well, we could be looking at this for people who are looking for investors, certainly, and also any of those of you who might be working in nonprofits or social enterprises, inability to raise funds. And why do I say that? Well, when we're not able to coherently talk about our story, when we aren't able to share the message of our value, the brand's value, why would people be interested in funding us, funding the project, funding the team? They can't connect with us. They can't connect with the message. They can't connect with the brand. That lack of connection, again, is reflective of brand-centered sustainability being weak. And keep in mind, when I use that word sustainability, we're not talking just about the brand. Sustainability is being able to take this for the long haul. It's building an idea, it's building a business, it's building a team, it's even building your own life in a way that allows you to overcome any challenges that you experience while you're building. It also allows you to capture on the opportunities for growth. Again, I must emphasize, not for short-term success, but for long-term impact, for sustainable impact. Lack of awareness in the community. Now, this goes for whether you're talking about an individual trying to network, whether you're talking about a small business, medium business, even Fortune 500, Fortune 100, a leader's community. You know, many communities are very, very tight-knit, and they really understand, even let's say the leadership brand of their individual leader. But when it comes time to, let's say, really digest the meaning behind the organization or the meaning behind the executive's goals, the meaning behind the executive's purpose and why she or he keeps driving a message or driving the teams towards certain objectives. When there's not an awareness of all of that in the community, again, brand-centered sustainability is weak. And awareness is really important. And very often we forget about that because we're moving very quickly, right? We have a lot of objectives. We have a lot of requirements depending on where we are professionally. There may be many people asking many things of us. And so we might, even in our own attempt to be successful in meeting goals and objectives set for us, become kind of a silo of ourself, right? So we bury ourselves in our computer and bury ourselves in our work, and we don't realize that we're not doing anything to create a higher awareness of our purpose or our team's purpose in the community. So a community can stand for the community of team, the community of department, the community of organization, but also all of the stakeholders. So who does that organization really serve? You know, what are they selling and who are they selling to? That's a community. Unhealthy work environment. So we see a lot about this, and in many different cultures, we talk about, you know, how are we creating working environments that inspire, that engage, and that also allow for both personal growth and even physical and emotional growth. You know, that our employees feel good about coming to work, that they're not getting sick due to stress, that they're not, you know, taking many sick days because they just can't get out of bed. They're so concerned, they're so worried, they're so bogged down by all of the objectives and goals that aren't even quite clear to them, that things are so murky. Even that can actually create an unhealthy work environment. And all of this can be tied back to putting brand at the core. Now, when we start talking about more succinctly or more directly an individual take on this, when someone's career focus is fuzzy, so I do a lot with individuals around career purpose. And I'll be honest and say that this can be challenging to uncover your career purpose. Yet when you do, it's truly profound. You have a personal brand, and then you want to look at that brand and how does that align with a career brand, an organization brand, an industry brand. When you can't define that, that career focus becomes very fuzzy. And so you might pick and choose things, and they might land for a short time. And then you might find yourself wanting to try another job, to move on to another company. You might even, unfortunately, find yourself unemployed. Again, that sustainability issue is the pivotal point here, because the brand wasn't put at the center, meaning your brand or your understanding of the organizational brand. And so the career focus becomes murky, and the roadmap for your career starts wavering, and you don't know which exit to take, so to speak. When there's a feeling of being stuck and unable to achieve dreams, and I see this so often with leaders. And I want to commend those of you right now listening live, or even those who may listen later, of doing the work to connect with your purpose, of doing the work to connect with your mission and your vision and understanding a brand. Yet, if we're not doing it at the extent of how it affects all facets of our life, that's where we can find ourselves feeling stuck. So we may have worked on it, but we may have worked on it halfway or just in pieces. And some of us have never worked on it because we've been working so hard on other parts and other components of our lives. And yet we finally get to this place where we go, I think I know what my dream is, and I don't understand the steps to get there. And I'm frustrated, and I don't know how to move forward. And the following, or the last bullet point here, I think really sums it up for both individuals and leaders and managers. This fear that others may fail you or you may fail them. If that's something that you're experiencing right now, or you know someone experiencing that, brand-centered sustainability tactics can help. So let me talk a little bit more about the value of BCS, or brand-centered sustainability. So it's getting back to the core promise of an organization and the delivery of that promise. And I mentioned, brand essence is a lot about a promise. We want to talk a little bit about branding, and I won't get into this deeply. I could do 5 hours just on branding alone. But for those of you who aren't as familiar with branding, I'd like to just go over a few components of it. So brand culture and its purpose is really the way a company reacts to its clients and its employees. So we often think about brand culture as, what are just the components of a brand? And if you think about the purpose, we could take a brand, a product brand. I'm going to grab something off my desk right now. It's a calculator. Okay, so it's made by Texas Instruments. And I might go, okay, Texas Instruments, I think of this brand as something that delivers for engineers. And these have nice big buttons, so it's good for me since, I am above the age of 40 and I often need reading glasses. So I think, okay, so its purpose is to deliver something that offers a technical way for me to achieve a goal. But what about the culture? I don't know if I know anything about the Texas Instruments culture. That culture is what allows its employees to thrive. And it's also what allows its clients to continue to come back to it. Because the culture, how it builds for its employees, those employees are going to respond and react to that culture, and they interact with the consumers and the clients. So it's all interchangeable. So it's also how it builds a reputation, right? So again, how we're all interacting with the brand and the culture really results in that reputation. And that's why I like to call it as purpose plus promise, expectations plus delivery. We think about it, people are making promises every day, inherent promises and exherent, promises. It's about how we say we're going to do X, Y, and Z, and whether we do X, Y, and Z, and how well do we do X, Y, and Z. So we make these promises about solutions, about products. Well, those promises land on expectations. So our teammates have expectations, our employees have expectations, our consumers and our clients have expectations. So that delivery is crucial. And that's why I say this interdependency of all facets of communication, the leadership, the brand essence, and the brand delivery, that is also another way of understanding what brand-centered sustainability is. So let's talk more about what a brand really is. So when I say brand, a lot of people immediately think of a logo. Some people will think a little bit more than that. They might think of a product. I'd like to describe brand in a different way. I say it's a covenant or a promise with a consumer or a client. And it actually doesn't have that physical embodiment. It isn't the logo, it isn't the tagline. They're part of the brand, but it's not the brand itself. Think of it this way. When a consumer hears, sees, or experiences your product or your service, all of the images, the thoughts, the emotions that are evoked in that consumer or that client, that's actually the brand. Brands exist in other people's minds. It's their take on us, or it's their take on our product, or it's their take on our company. And when we think about staff, when staff experiences us as leaders, it's their experience of our leadership. So brand exists in other people's minds. Yet we do have the ability to manage that. I mentioned brand essence very early on in this presentation. Here's another way of thinking of brand essence. It's your promise to your audience, your members, your staff, all whom you reach and service on what you will deliver. So the brand essence, think of it kind of as that core of who you are, what your brand represents, and how you deliver on it. The brand identity and the brand essence are somewhat overlapped. Now, this is where what a lot of people think of as brand comes into play. The brand identity, that is the visual and word reference to your brand. So that is your logo, your name. It's anything that reveals a visual recall, and it's also your reputation. So it could be the colors that you use. It could be the auto signature in your emails. It could be your username. All of that reflects your brand. It's the colors on the website. It may be a certain language that every town hall meeting is kicked off with. It could be the slides that are used when you deliver PowerPoints, that all of them have a certain look, a certain feel. All of that is the brand identity. I wanted to put up a fun word cloud. I don't know if many of you use word clouds, but I think word clouds are really interesting because we can take something that we have written. It can be an internal document. It can be an external document. It can even be just a reflection that we journal around for our own brand essence. And you put it in a word cloud and you see what comes up. And so I combine this idea of brand essence and brand-centered sustainability into this word cloud. And I love what comes up here. You see these words, promise and organization. You see the word soul, embodiment, power, essence, identity, leadership. You see things about being delivered and reaching members, sustainability, recall. Recall is huge in brand-centered sustainability. There are so many powerful brands that we remember for about a week, and then we can't recall them anymore. And that's very often because they either haven't delivered well on the brand promise, or they didn't create platforms to sustain the brand messaging. So this is just a fun way of visually showing all of the things that are encompassed in delivering a sustainable culture and healthy leadership through branding. So brand is also the DNA of your organization. So when we think about DNA, we think about something, so much at the core that really extends outward. And when we can extend outward, we think about the power of extending beyond just who we are. We think about the power of extending to every department, every channel, every community, perhaps, depending on your goal, extending throughout the global network. So the brand or the DNA or the soul of the organization, it is the sum of all of the traits and qualities. The brand represents the mission, the vision, the values, and I've mentioned this, the promises and the solutions. So important here. There's only a few things that you take away. It's also about the reputation. Now, of course, we can do a lot to remedy bad reputations, and we can do a lot to build a reputation that we want people to have. But ultimately, reputations only last when they're authentic. And reputations that are authentic last because of the brand essence being worked on continually, and because of leadership taking that in at the core. So how well a company or an organization, or I'll include in here, even though it's not in the slide, an individual, how well they live up to all of the stakeholders' expectations of that brand. The expectations based on what is published of the mission or the vision, based on what is promised, based on the solutions that are offered. So if those expectations are met or exceeded, the reputation is stellar and it lasts. Brand leadership is about the power of how the brand is managed and delivered throughout all areas of the organization rather than just the visual identity, thinking logo, thinking colors. Brand-centered sustainability is both the process and the byproduct of the leadership driving authentic success with the brand at the core of the communications and the decision. Now, it's wonderful and lovely and possibly motivating to talk about branding, but how do you do it? So brand platforms are really important. So defining a brand platform allows for structure, protocols, goals, rules, communication, and culture to connect the values that the brand stands for. So think about this as almost organizational development, somewhat strategic planning for how teams work, for how individuals work within those teams, for how an organization delivers, whether it's company memos, whether it's the manual, the handbook for how staff responds to crises, how staff responds to promotions. It is about what is needed to know in order to perform effectively and efficiently. So it's also about, doing all of this, about delivering on these promises to the highest potential of serving clients and customers. And, I talk about meeting their expectation, but we want to also think, what is their expectation? It should be about satisfying experiences. And then when we talk about staff, perhaps it's more than just satisfying experiences. It all depends on your organization and your vision and your mission. It may be about the experience of one that is motivational and inspirational. It may be about one that is challenging. It may just be about one that encourages stability and being part of a whole. Maybe your organization, your team is not about shining a light on one person, but about the importance of each person in being part of that mission, being part of that vision. Yet if structure and protocols and goals and rules aren't developed in a way that is clearly understood and connected to the brand, you will often find that these experiences aren't as satisfying. So I'm going to repeat something that we saw earlier. Purpose plus promise, expectations plus delivery actually equal resilient brand reputations. They will stand the test of time, even when there are bumps in the road. And I believe this happens because we're doing it from an authentic place, not a manipulative stance just to win over employees or just to corner the market or just to get a share. We're doing this because we authentically believe in our service or we authentically believe in our product. We really know that we can make an impact in the world or that what we sell is going to help other organizations. Maybe we're manufacturing parts. It really could be anything as long as there's this authentic understanding that what we're doing has meaning and purpose. And so when we do that, we can actually enhance the chance that others will believe in us and others will help spread our message. So that's when we build upon brand champions and brand ambassadors. And these are people that are both internal and external stakeholders of the brand. Think of them as your chief communicators and storytellers. They know how to talk about what your value is and why you're worthwhile, why your company's worthwhile, why your product's worthwhile, or even why you as an employee or a leader, why you're worthwhile. They're passionate about the brand. They build loyal followings for it. And they can actually be drivers of brand leadership. When you create brand champions and brand ambassadors internally, also another wonderful part of this is that it helps you in succession planning. So because these people are so loyal, they're willing to take on other responsibilities if you care for them to. They're willing sometimes to take on responsibilities in other departments, to learn new skills, and you start growing your leadership before they're even in leadership roles. So I'd mentioned brand culture earlier before. So in environment, it's usually within the organization and it reflects how the brand is communicated, articulated, and acted on in day-to-day operations. So, we've read a lot, many of you have read a lot about different big companies, whether it's Zappos or Facebook or some of these other incredibly powerful companies, and you have a sense of what it's like to work inside that company. That's the brand culture. And that's why I say it can be palpable. You walk in and you kind of have this feeling, this sensation, what this company is about and what they expect of their employees. It's reflective of values, goals, promises, and it's also reflective of the expectations that people have, right? So I know I worked once at this large ad agency in Manhattan, and for those of you who have ever seen television shows about working at ad agencies, this truly reflected what that brand was. Hardworking. Sometimes he worked until 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and we started at 7. Yet there was this area called the pit, and you could go down into the pit where all the designers were, and then next to the pit was another area where there were computer games and ping pong tables and basketball games and things to just kind of break free for a moment. And you were allowed to bring your dog to the office as long as the dog wasn't too vocal. It was a sense of culture and expectation that those who worked for that organization, that ad agency, expected. And even the clients, when they came in, they expected it. They kind of heard about it, right? Because that brand permeates beyond the organization. Again, especially because of the brand champions and the brand ambassadors. People wanted to work there. The time that I was working there, it was, I think, it was either number 1 or number 2 private brand agency in the country. Now, a lot of that was because it did meet and exceed the expectations of its clients. It also was very conscious of all stakeholders, meaning its employees and its vendors. So I often worked with the vendors. So I realized that I had to carry out that brand essence, that brand culture, that brand promise, even with the vendors, not just my own staff and not just the clients. So we build all this. Well, how do we know if it's strong? How do we know if it's weak? How do we know if it's sustainable? So we often talk about brand awareness. So this is often a calculation of a target audience. So a lot of marketing people know how to do this, right? And their knowledge of and comfort with a brand's message, promise, solution, and attributes. So we can do that by way of assessments. They can be informal, they can be formal, they can just be one-on-one interviews. You can even start to take memos or kind of journal around, what your stakeholders are telling you. And, are your clients really in line with what you believe you're delivering? You can see that in the virtual world. You can see that in terms of what they're tweeting about you and what they're saying on Facebook and LinkedIn. We're no longer in this silo. Everything is connected. So in a more formal way, we can do that brand audit. So I talked about an assessment. And what the assessment normally covers is it will measure the strength of brand awareness. It'll measure recall and understanding of the brand attributes in the brand story. So we think about, a lot of times people know a brand, they understand somewhat what it stands for. They can't necessarily tell you the story or the history of the brand. Yet really strong brands come with that history, and there's a story that people tell about it. There's a story they tell about the product. There's a story they tell about the leader. So we measure that recall of those attributes and that story, the history of the brand. We also examine brand associations. So associations can mean anything from an emotional association, an intellectual association, and yet also associations with other brands. As I said, none of this is in a vacuum. So when you partner with another organization, when you do co-branding with another product, those associations are felt and experienced by your stakeholders. We look at alignment with platform. Now, so that's something that's a little bit more internal related. So when we do this brand audit, we're looking at how does the brand match up with the advertising that's created, the public relations campaign that's created. Even as I mentioned earlier, the memos that you might send out or the PowerPoint slides, do they make sense? Do they seem like they match up? Does it seem like it's all part of the same organization, the same team, the same company? We measure the culture as it is aligned with external perceptions. So we've got this internal culture, what we know that staff experience internally. Well, externally, do the people who either want to work for our company know of this culture? Do they expect that culture? Do the vendors that we work with who believe in us, do they know that's what our culture is? So is it in alignment in a way, again, that ultimately people can tell the same story, become our brand ambassadors, and further our cause? Now, when I say further our cause, if you're a nonprofit, that's one thing. But if you're a for-profit, furthering your cause really does mean bottom line results, right? So we need to sell services or we need to sell products. And, you know, just advertising alone is not going to do that in a sustainable way. And so that leads me to the accuracy of the communication and brand messages as compared to expected perceptions. So we're going to, in a formal brand audit, look at how did the campaign, whether it was a public relations campaign or an advertising campaign, how did that really land for the audiences that we hoped to target? So integrating, we're all about integrating the leadership, the brand, and sustainability. And so integrating as a process relates to long-term success and sustainability. So we're talking about how that organization leads through the brand, how they connect the internal brand leverage to external brand consumption. So we're talking about the internal brand, that's that culture, and it might even be the individual brands of the leadership, and how do you meet that with how the external clients and consumers understand you? It's a systemic and holistic approach to leadership because you're always aligning the brand promises with the expectations, and you're double checking, triple checking, making sure they make sense. It's the capacity for leadership as a process to be carried out across departments. So even if you're working in a less matrixed organization, if the brand is at the core, the ultimate leadership, the C-suite, can still help manage this coherent and cohesive process of delivering on promises and expectations, because the core values and missions and visions and goals are all centered around that brand and can be disseminated across departments, and through the silos. So now we're talking about, instead of measuring the brand of the leader, it's about measuring leadership and culture through its authentic strategic alignment with the brand. If you think about it, it's almost like marrying the C-suite with all other channels. So there's a lot of responsibility that goes along with it, but the responsibility gets shared. We need to communicate through our brand. Communication to just communicate accomplishes goals, and that's important. But communication to disseminate information and promises and solutions can exceed expectations and add power beyond simple goals. Because remember, I said this before, every company, every organization, and every individual has a brand. And these promises and these solutions, these messages of values, they're being offered 24/7, whether we realize it or not, especially as the world is connected through the internet. So communicating through your brand allows for authentic, creative, strategic process for demonstrating value. I said it before, it creates a platform for engagement, a foundation for customer and client engagement. It even improves acquisition and retention, especially when you're talking about employees that you want and you want to keep them on board. Now, I know we're coming up for time, so I want to make sure that I can get to these last two slides. So sustainability through brand, it looks at the health of the community, the team, the group, or the organization through the following lenses: employee engagement, the culture of brand communications, your strength of brand awareness, the integration of stakeholders, their personal brands with the team or the organizational brand. It's not always going to be a perfect fit, but there will be a common core purpose. There'll be a commonality of that individual mission or that individual vision with the organizational vision and mission. When you have that in alignment, you have long-term loyal staff members and you have long-term loyal consumers and clients. So it also is looking through strategies for improved interpersonal skill set, communication, relationships, and cross-departmental function. When you apply brand-centered sustainability and then you work on assessing it, you're looking at assessing the current brand leadership or the brand-centered sustainability qualities. In doing so, a company, an organizational possesses the strength-based creative strategies that they can develop to leverage the company's brand. So instead of just creating the brand and putting it out there, you are leveraging it to increase productivity and effectiveness of all of the organization's members and its communications. And ultimately, what is this about? It's about positively affecting the bottom line and the organization's goals. So I wanted to talk about a quick case study if we have a few minutes, and I'll make it very quick if we have the time. Do we have the time for that?
Yes, you can go ahead.
Okay, wonderful. So very, very quickly, there was a very large nonprofit that I worked with to do some strategic planning. And when they found out about the brand-centered sustainability, we used the pilot of an assessment related to it to do the strategic planning. They were about to launch two large facilities, and they were very concerned that they were serving slightly different audiences, and how did they still keep in tune with one brand of the organization. So when we started doing the facilitation, the nonprofit board had one understanding of the vision and the mission. The upper level staff had a different perspective. And then when I facilitated the volunteers and the part-time staff, it was just completely different in terms of what they understood of the vision and the mission. So what we did is we did some fun and creative exercises around what they envisioned would be the ultimate impact that they would like to make in their community, what they saw as the end goal, what would be sustainable that they could believe in as employees and that they could believe in that would serve their community. And when we did that, what was so fascinating is the board created a private mission statement. The staff created a private mission statement. We shared that in one large facilitation. And all of that resulted in a slightly revised vision and mission statement that they shared with all of their stakeholders. We polled their stakeholders, we assessed every vendor, we assessed former clients, and we assessed other nonprofits that did similar work. And what we came up with was a revised mission statement, vision statement, and a 3-year strategic plan. They rolled it out with unparalleled success. They even were able to keep on board several staff members who were on the verge of quitting. And so we saw this instance where the energy and the dedication and the passion was completely revitalized on all levels, on the levels of the board, on the levels of the staff, the volunteers, and then they were able to raise funds. They surpassed what they thought they would meet even in that first 2 years for building these 2 large facilities. And so that to me is a testament to brand-centered sustainability. By putting the brand at the center of all of their strategies, they were able to create something that was lasting, was meaningful, and was resilient. And so the last slide is really just your takeaway. You know, by placing your brand at the core, you develop leadership capabilities that surpass surface growth. And so that, I would just like to, leave it open at this point.
Thank you very much for an engaging presentation. Folks, we are now open for the question answer. If you have any question, you can either put in the question box given in the end of the webinar console, or you could equally raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon available on the webinar console. So let me go straight to the question box. Jessi, we have a question for you, that is, what does it take to create a leadership brand that boosts both the career and the organization?
So what does it take to create a leadership brand that kind of says woos, kind of, I guess, inspires the organization?
Yes, the career and
well, I think a lot of that comes from a leader who's willing to be a bit vulnerable, okay, and to ask what are people expecting of that leadership. Do they expect someone who's very directive? Do they expect a lot of feedback? So I think part of that is being willing to do some assessment work. I think the other part is to really pay attention to the stories that are already being told and seeing where people feel rewarded and where they feel punished. When people feel punished, you notice that they pull back. They don't contribute. Where they feel rewarded, they start contributing more. And that usually is a reflection of a leader and the leadership brand that is engaging and positive. So I think two things is the vulnerability and the willingness to poll the stakeholders, and also the willingness to step back and really pay attention to when people seem to be at their best and their most excited.
Another quick question for you is, how does a leadership brand support the organization?
Excellent question. The leadership brand supports the organization when we hope there's a very deep connection with the organization's mission and vision and values, but it's not always perfectly connected. I think there must be a good core connection to the mission and the values. And that leadership brand will actually demonstrate it by behavior. So the leadership brand can be a leader's brand, but it can also be the process of leadership. So that also means consistency. So it could be the middle management or the C-suite getting together and talking about, how do we inspire our team? What are the things that we will do that we agree to when it comes time to promoting? What will we do to engage our employees? Do we like to do retreats? And if we say we're going to do retreats every quarter, we must do retreats every quarter. I think there also must be a level of transparency. There's a lot of discussion about transparency, and I do think it depends on the industry and the organization in terms of how transparent you need to be. However, if you're completely opaque and there's no transparency, it's very difficult for a leadership brand to connect to the organization and deliver on its promises, because it feels very hidden, and it feels that the leadership is kind of holding everything close to the vest versus supporting those who support the leader. So if you think about it, all departments support the leader supports the organization. There must be a ribbon of connection that allows some transparency of the values, the vision, and the mission.
Thank you, Jessi, for the brief answer. We have last but not least question for you, that is, what is the relationship between internal branding, employee brand, and brand endorsement?
Oh, wow. I could probably take an hour to answer that. So I'll try my best to answer it briefly. So internal branding, we're not necessarily going to express all of our internal brand externally. So the internal brand is really how we deliver our leadership and how we match up what we say our values, our mission, and our vision are. However, that should match up with what we say we deliver as a service or a product. So when we look at brand endorsement, and this can be very difficult sometimes because there can be a dangling carrot with a really enticing brand endorsement deal. We should be, in my professional opinion, looking at brand endorsements that still connect with our vision and mission, our values, and what we believe those that we serve. So that means our customers or clients, what they expect. So, if our customers and clients expect a product that is sustainable, let's say it's environmentally sustainable, and we have some type of brand endorsement with an organization that has nothing to do with that. In fact, they were in the news for something quite opposite. We are weakening our brand and we are completely going against sustainability. Now, if we are looking to create brand endorsement, let's say we're on the other side of the coin and we want to endorse a brand, again, we're looking at a brand that is going to match up or marry with values, visions, and missions that we can connect with and that our stakeholders expect us to deliver on. Because that expectation is huge. It's always going to come back to our reputation. And let me tell you, there's a lot of different statistics around, but I've read one that says, we need at least three experiences of a positive message to remember it. But if we have a negative experience, it can take up to 27 messages to conquer that negative experience. So when we think about brand endorsement, we really want to think about connecting with something that's authentically related to what we believe we can deliver on and expectations that we can meet or exceed.
Thank you, Jessi. Before we end the webinar, do you have any concluding remarks?